Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery and crack. This week's topic is stress and came about because Anthony was actually having a stressful week himself. So we decided to talk about what stress means to the both of us on air.
And I definitely developed this mindset of go into the difficult space. Find the discomfort and go sit in it, because I heard all these stories like, the Bodhisattvas used to go to the battlegrounds the day after the battle and cover their bodies in the ash of the burning corpses and pray for the souls to be released. This idea that there is value in discomfort, so you need to search it out. In actual fact, you don't need to search out fuck all. Discomfort will find you. And actually, what I think would be more important is to have a destination in mind and to be willing to go through discomfort on the way there.
Yeah.
Well,
So this is on.
this is on.
Do you not want to talk off mic before what we're going to do?
Feels like it would ruin the spontaneity, Bart.
Okay.
And given that this will generate a bit of extra stress, I feel like that's almost appropriate.
Okay, no, well, I like, usually your thinking on this is very good, but the problem is that I like to put a little structure in place so that I know what I'm doing.
Well,
Right.
will we pause it for?
No, fuck
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
You are wise and I am not.
Well, no,
Let's
I
go.
don't. I disagree with that. But you are wise and I am not could also be a podcast title.
Yes.
But yeah, we're going to talk about stress.
Yes.
Yes, because people need that, because there's nobody on the internet talking about stress.
No. You could also just call it mental health, and then people would be very happy with us.
Oh yeah, they would. We would. I'm not gonna go head to head with Bressie though. That guy looks mean.
And quite handsome.
Yeah, mean and handsome.
That's
Horrible
how you would-
combination.
Yeah, yeah. What does that mean to you? Stress.
So, what I always think of with stress, the first thing that comes to my head is when I'm in practitioner mode, and it's the way stress is used by the biomedical practitioners. So what you'll often see is people will go to a doctor and they'll complain of an issue, fatigue, headaches, something like this, and they'll be given a drug, they'll be given a test, they'll be given another drug, X, Y, Z. And then oftentimes when the doctor is out of ideas, they're like, oh, it must be stress. And I find that an extraordinary approach to health, where you're like, oh, what you had didn't respond to our treatment. We don't, the drugs I gave you did not fix your issue. It's down to this thing called stress. Stress is this thing which we can't really define, but it's your fault. You are stressed. Stress is not happening to you, You are stressed, and it's strong enough that it can cause all your health issues, but also I'm not going to do anything about it. You handle that. And I just think for any kind of healthcare practitioner, that's quite a bold approach to take. And with the caveat that I know not all GPs are like this. I know that there are some supports in place. There are, CBD courses and stuff, or CBT courses, and I think you get 10 counselling sessions and stuff like that, which is great. But that telling somebody that their problems are caused by stress seems to me like the best and worst diagnosis in the world, in that it doesn't actually guide a lot of treatment, and it also puts things back on the patient. So that gets my goat a little bit.
Clearly, yeah.
Yes. So good to start this with a really heavy rant. I think that's also something worth thinking about, is how do we keep an episode about stress light? But
No, I think that's just on the other person. I think if someone goes off a little bit, we can just go.
yeah,
And I think, we don't need to do too many caveats and stuff.
true.
That's because that's what you and I do for safety.
Yeah.
Talking about stress for safety, we always contextualize everything.
Yeah.
And it's good to contextualize things. I'm contextualizing what I said about contextualizing, but it doesn't always need to happen. So what does it mean to you as a person?
As a person, I often think of stress as I think one of the things that people misunderstand about stress is that stress is a very healthy thing. You know, our body, our minds are designed to be stressed. Stress will not disappear. Stress is a method of adaptation to the environment, you know, and adaptation is what, you know, if you listen to Jung, it's what makes you happy, is your ability to adapt to circumstance. Yeah. So if you listen to if you look at any around the world, indigenous peoples, a lot of coming of age rituals involve stress or pain or fear or, you know, stress can be a good thing. Chronic stress is where it becomes a bad thing.
Yeah.
And now I think we have this aversion to the idea of any kind of stress, which is it's not true. You know, we need to be able to temporarily being stressed and then dealing with it is absolutely healthy. It's actually part of being a grown-up. But chronic stress is something different then. And when you get into chronic stress, you know, there's this idea of embodied stress or reactive stress. Some people are just stressed. Like they can be zero outside influences and they're still stressed. Or then some people are under tremendous situational pressure, in which case stress is a completely normal and healthy response to that. And those two situations are very, very different, even though we call them both stress.
Yeah. I think the chronic stress is the one I think of when you mention stress. Yeah. It's just that feeling of, I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling like I was kind of had this image of a kettle that's turning red with overboiling kind of, and I feel like I'm locked into it. I can't get out of it. That'd be, when you say stress, that's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, when I suppose I wanted to ask, when does it occur for you?
At the moment.
No, I'm very aware, and I feel a bit bad for pushing you a little on it, because I know it's nice to talk about it as a practitioner, but I kind of, you turned the fucking mics on, so
I did,
and I was thinking kind thoughts while listening, but I do want to, so without being too specific, but being specific enough in a general way, if you know what I mean. What causes it for you?
So I'm going to answer this two ways. I'm going to transition out of practitioner mode.
Good man.
But
very brave.
On my way out,
I'm just going to torch the fucking building.
as I'm, storming out of the party, I'm going to fire one last bar.
Yeah, exactly.
You said something there about being trapped. So most of what a lot of what we call stress in Western thinking or biomedicine, Chinese medicine would relate to the liver. We call it liver qi stagnation. We don't actually call it that. That's the English translation. It's a poor translation. But a lot, not all, but a lot of our conceptualization of stress is the job of your liver is to move qi in Chinese medicine. And that means basically, a better way of saying it is the liver likes to move. All right, so the liver benefits from long, continuous exercise. It benefits from lack of inhibition. Kids don't have liver qi stagnation because they're running around doing absolutely anything they want. You know, if you're walking through the woods, you don't have your phone. Nobody wants anything from you. You don't need to be back at any particular time. That's exactly what the liver wants to be doing. And you said something there about feeling trapped. So we view a lot of stress symptoms as liver qi wanting to move and then not being allowed to.
Yeah.
So we want to move either emotionally, physically, creatively, relationally, socially, geographically. Like we want to move somehow and we are being blocked. And that leads to the kettle. The kettle's actually a really good example because we say liver qi ascends as well. That's where you get the tight jaws, the tight shoulders, headaches. Anger, is like when the kettle, releases a bit of a pressure valve. So this idea of feeling trapped, that definitely applies to me personally.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think some people are, and one thing I should say is I'll often get people talking to me going, you're a practitioner, you must be super healthy. And I'm like, no, I do this so I can stay alive. I'm not. I remember seeing an interview with a guy who lived a really minimalist lifestyle, had very few possessions, and they were like, oh, you must be very zen. He's like, no, I'm a fucking disaster. I have to live minimalistically because if I live any other way, my life just becomes completely unmanageable. And I think whatever practitioners say, a lot of us are like this. We have our struggles and we've found a method that has helped with them and we've devoted ourselves to that. But yeah, long story short, I'm not immune from stress at all. And yeah, personally, work gets on top of me like that. I feel, God, this is going to get very honest, but like, no, I feel the pressure of people's, you don't expect, not even expectations. You don't want to let people down, you know? I think there's that aspect of not all work, but most work where you're making a promise, where you're like, I'm going to be able to deliver this thing. And because I work a lot with people, you know, like if I'm collaborating with other businesses and stuff, they're businesses I respect and people I like personally as well as respect professionally. And if I feel like I'm not delivering, yeah, that really gets on top of me. Time stresses me out as well, deadlines, because the way I work is I do a lot of my work subconsciously. That's churning away in the background. That could go on for a week, and then I'll sit down and do like 6 hours of brilliant work. But like if you tell me I'll just do 1 hour a day for 6 days, I don't work like that. So yeah.
I was just in my listening mode, which is not ideal for a podcast. But I was just absorbing what you were saying.
Hopefully the mic is picking that up.
Yeah. I'm looking very thoughtful,
deep
but with kind eyes. I was thinking that in my work as a translator, which is my main source of income at the moment, kind of transitioning a bit, but that's still the main source of income. It's very clear and clean, and I think I picked it for that reason. It's just I get a purchase order. This is the deadline. This is the word count. This is the word rate. Boom. And if someone goes, no, but it's actually, I'm like, no. You look at the purchase order. It said noon, and then maybe someone, can you please do this? I will check. Yes, I can do this. Whereas I think because you're dealing with people and with people's health in a very broad way, or not in a broad way as in, you know what I mean? Like you a lot of aspects of health. And then you also deal with people from different cultures, of course, because you deal with people in Taiwan and over that way. I was wondering, is it a question of you being very strict with meeting what's expected of you, but other people changing the rules a little bit? Or the rules not the right word, but I mean, like, is it that you're very strict about wanting to be good and wanting to do what you should do, whereas other people might be bending that a little bit and being dependent on you because they know you're going to solve it for them?
Yeah, look, there's a bit of that. It depends on how you present yourself, you know? Like if you present yourself as a problem solver, you know, as a person who can get things done, then people are going to come to you for that. I think if we're talking about like chronic versus acute stress, I think if you're in the kind of work where, you know, and I'm not going to undermine what you do at all, Bart, because like it's not easy work, and you know, but you described there a couple of aspects that you enjoy about the work you have, and I think even if you have in those situations, and you'll have other stresses, but like if you have a big job, you go in hard, but there's a definite end, and then there's a paycheck coming. You know, so it's like temporary stress. You know, it's like, okay, I have to do this. It's not pleasant to be handcuffed to my laptop for 8 hours, but, you know, I'll get through it. I think what's going on with me is that I'm involved in a lot of very big projects that will unfold over years, if at all. You know? And there's this constancy of just like problem solving that isn't leading to necessarily a cookie or a carrot, but just means the thing can keep limping, limping along, but it can keep, it can keep trundling along. And it's, you know, these projects are not at the stage where they're showing a lot of measurable results yet. And I have tremendous faith in them. And I really think they'll be worth doing. But I find that quite tough, that there isn't a reward for the effort put in.
Well, that's kind of what I mean, and I completely hear what you're saying, but I think, like for me, music and artsy things, or more communication things, like what we want to do with the podcast, that's that's all to me very interesting and very exciting, but complicated.
Yeah.
It can be complicated. I'm not saying it's complicated with you, but it has a lot more to do with very subtle things, with the invisible things that we might want to hang this podcast on, because I do think that's interesting. And have to do with social interactions. But that's why I heard someone say this. It was probably Ring the Bell, Jordan Peterson, who I think he said something like, people talk about careers, but a lot of people have jobs. And I really picked a job. I would not be doing that if I wasn't getting paid for it.
Yeah.
So I made sure I got reasonably well paid for it, and it gives me a lot of freedom and not a lot of stress. Yeah. My stress in terms of that work comes more from being a dad and a freelancer, and so you always get to be the one where it's like, oh, can you just squeeze this little job in, or when the guy comes to fix the thing, or so that's where my stress comes from, is having to be a lot of people in a single day. But the work itself I've made as stressless as possible. So I think that's a very conscious choice, and a lot of people go, oh, I have a wonderful career, I'm getting this new job, and I think some of them are fooling themselves. It's that thing, I saw that on Instagram, I think it's like, if you were dead tomorrow, they would have had you replaced by next week. You know?
And it's like... The version I heard was, the only 10 years from now, the only people that will remember you worked late are your kids. Exactly.
And so I think I picked that to go... And I have to be careful not to be... I have to be respectful of it as well, because it gives me the income I need to support my family and to live a certain way. But it doesn't interest me a lot, but it doesn't cost me a lot of energy, and I think that's why I've picked it. But I think your work is very meaningful, but that makes it complicated then as well.
Yeah, it does. And like, you know, I don't think I can claim more stress, because it's not an isolated thing, Bart, as well. Your job has to fit into your life.
Yeah, but I'm not. We're not doing the victim Olympics here.
No,
I'm just analyzing. I could see how that'd be tricky. Yeah.
And you know, I think for me, look, if we're analyzing it in terms of like the liver, then you need to feel less stuck, you know, and it's that feeling of being trapped that really gets me. And I think sometimes as well, like, you know, I've talked about how stress lies on the person, because I think we have a little bit of weaponized mindfulness as well these days, where like corporations are like, oh, you're feeling stressed, you poor thing, do your CBT and get back to fucking work. You know, if you're stressed, it's because you haven't been doing your mindfulness. You know, that's your fault. And like, you know, this is a really tricky thing. This is a problem I do not have the answer to. But there are aspects of our health that live outside of ourselves. I have a patient. She works in a school. She's a sensitive soul. Principal has it out for her. Gives her a nervous breakdown. She comes to me. We do a bunch of treatment. 2-3 months later, she's doing really well. Goes back to school. 11 days later, medically discharged, because the principal gave her another nervous breakdown. Now, how much mindfulness does that woman have to do? You know?
No, you just have to get out of that situation. Like, so it does live outside of you.
So, but then there's people in situations that they cannot change. You know, people, we can name dozens of them, hundreds of them. You know, there are people that are completely not in control, that they do have the ability to leave the situation they are in. And then for them, that ability to sit with it becomes vital. And it's about the discernment. I mean, I think this is one of the big questions of life, isn't it? Like, when do you move and when do you wait it out? When do you change something, and when do you bide your time and learn to deal with the discomfort?
100%. I was, I had one job where I had that situation where someone was making my working life hell, and I just knew they were going to get me fired, even though I was doing a good job. But it was kind of, I suppose, when you said it lives outside themselves, then it's more of a meta level, like, what do you need to rearrange in your life? And when it really ramped up, I was like, okay, this is making me very unhappy. They're probably going to get me fired here. Okay, I'm going to find something else to do. And then when they did, it was actually like a relief. They kind of like, I sat down and they were like, yeah, we're really sorry, but your contract's not going to be renewed. And I was like, okay, thank you. And they're like, do you not want to talk more about that? And I said, well, I think I did a good job. I know why this is happening, but I don't want to. It's fine. And everyone was distraught. They were like, oh my God, it was really, it was a nice moment. It was a powerful moment. I was just like, oh, thank God I'm done with this shit.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like that ability to have an effect on your environment, that thing about agency.
Yeah.
I think that's you exercising your right to move.
Yeah.
It's your exercising your ability to say, I'm not trapped, Yeah. Because they can feel like they're pinning you to the wall and going, oh, you don't have a job anymore. And for you to be able to say, I'm grand with that actually gives me a bit of freedom,
Oh, and it was like, it's funny when you can, how would we put that? Like when you can really have a little victory over yourself. It's mainly a victory over yourself. If I could be in a scarcity mindset going, oh God, there will never be another job, which would obviously be nonsense. And it wasn't like the best job ever or anything. But when it's a little victory when you go, no, I actually have faith in myself and in the universe that this is going to be fine. And then when you have that, the situation becomes extraordinary, because then people are all like, oh no, where are you going? I'm like, well, I'm fired. And they were all like, oh Jesus, but no, you can't. And I was like, no, it's fine. And then the person who, in a really nasty way, made it happen, just stood there like shivering. And I just walked up and shook their hand and went like, good luck. This must be quite difficult. And it was just like, da, da, da. You could hear the music in the background, you're like, it's funny. Like, it's funny when life turns into nearly like a movie scene.
Yeah.
But it does sometimes when you're able to make the big leap, I think, or something. And you have to be able to do that. I do, like you say, I know people who, for seemingly no fault of their own, like there's always some aspect of something you've created. But I think a lot of times people will inherit terrible habits or pains, and then those, without them knowing it, create their life, and then they have to deal with that. And those can be terrible situations where they're really stuck. But it forces people into fucking diamonds as well.
Well, that's the thing, Hold on a sec. I'm just going to drop your recording level.
Yeah, am I being far too?
Oh no, that's okay. No, not far too. Just
I do see it, but
yeah, because there is an aspect of, and this kind of goes back to when do you sit with discomfort and when do you change things?
Yeah, exactly.
I had a kung fu teacher when I was like 14, 15, because I was having the tar beaten out of me. And it seemed like an appropriate thing to do, and it was. But he is a lad from Belfast, and he has had a very particular upbringing. Thank you very much. Some lovely coffee, Foley. And he, God, looking back on it, the fact that we were a bunch of like 13 to 15-year-olds, he trained us really hard. And he used to keep saying, find the stillness and the discomfort, for holding horse stance or a plank or something for like 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. You just like find the stillness and the discomfort. And you start looking for discomfort because that becomes familiar to you. And another thing like you do with the like kung fu and stuff like that is like you train your weaknesses. So like an example would be like if I'm right-handed, so I'd be normally standing left foot forward. Orthodox stance, you'd spend loads of time in the other stance, to work on your weak points. And I definitely developed this mindset of go into the difficult space. Find the discomfort and go sit in it, because I heard all these stories like, the Bodhisattvas used to go to the battlegrounds the day after the battle and cover their bodies in the ash of the burning corpses and pray for the souls to be released. This idea that like there is like reward, there is value in discomfort. So you need to search it out. In actual fact, you don't need to search out fuck all. Discomfort will find you. And actually, what I think would be more important is like to have a destination in mind and to be willing to go through discomfort on the way there. And I think that was just a tremendous misreading of what that was trying to get across, because you do see it in people that have gone through difficult situations, poor relationships or bad childhoods, or, you know, they will go back to the thing that caused them pain or something very similar to it because it is familiar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And they will be okay with that discomfort.
I'm realizing I need a notepad to sometimes write a little thing down, because I've had a few things that came up to me while you were saying that, and I'm trying to hold them all in my mind, which is hard.
Well, spit them out
but
there.
The first one is actually my wife, who's a therapist. Usually says when there is a painful situation, or when there's a trauma, there is also a chest of gold somewhere in that, and you can choose, like, the trauma is happening to you anyway. Might as well, like, the best outcome is to get that chest of gold as well, and not just the pain. That was one thing, but the other one was more profound. And now, I was thinking that sometimes the weird thing with the discomfort is because if you're interested in a bit of Jungian psychology, or you're on YouTube listening to, you know, people who have interesting to say about that, because I do think a lot of us consume stuff that way, you know, going to, listening to podcasts.
Yeah,
and
don't
stuff
read
like
books, just listen to us, you know. We've read books or skimmed them. No.
Yeah, but even audiobooks, I find it so much easier to do that than reading, because you can do it while you're washing the dishes. But I've heard you hear a lot that sort of thing of, like, that you have to go to the darkest part of the forest to find the thing you need, or you know, or face the dragon, or that kind of thing. But I think sometimes the issue is that we, because of the fairy stories we know and the culture we live in and all that, and not in a bad way, but it looks a certain way in our head. Like, I'm taking my sword and I'm facing this dragon, but actually I'm realizing of late that I've always been kind of trained by family and circumstance to be a certain way. Actually, my discomfort looks very different. Certainly, if you would send me to war, that would be very uncomfortable in an external way. But actually, internally, my discomfort looks very different. My discomfort might not be grabbing a sword and being brave, because I've had situations where it's like, someone wants to fight you, or you need to protect someone. And there's just a part that goes, this is what we do. Yeah. And I'm not saying, it's not like, this might go well. And I'm not saying, I'm some cool dude or whatever, but it's like that part. And I think you have this as well, with the burning boats that I can see in your eyes. Like, we both have that role of protector a bit. So you're comfortable enough with that. But I'm very uncomfortable with certain things, like, I won't go too specific, but like, telling someone that they've disappointed me. I just go, oh God, no. And that seems so much more soft and not like a brave thing. You know what I mean? But that is actually my dark part of the forest, in part, might be going to a significant person in my life, or family member or someone, and going, hey, I'm just going to tell you how that sucked. Yeah. And I'm not going to couch it. I'm not going to make it soft. I'm not going to go, well, I do understand your position, but actually just go, hi, that sucked. And hurt them. And it hurt me. And hurt them by telling them the truth. Yeah. Oh, even the idea now. It's horrible. But don't you think, like, when you were talking, I was thinking about that it's interesting that the image of it, sometimes the reality is very different. And that might sometimes be why we don't see it. Because we think, where is this dragon? Yeah. It's like, he's just there with a knitted jumper on the couch. And it looks like a kindly old woman or whatever, you know.
So that's so interesting. I think it's so true, because, again, maybe there's some male conditioning in there as well, you know. But like, different things will stress out different people, you know. Yeah. And that idea of going to war, that idea of being a tough man and a protector and all this stuff, like, definitely my old kung fu teacher, like, had that. He used to, you know, if he was in the pub, he'd make sure he sat with his back to a wall facing the door, you know, and stuff like that. And there's, and I don't mean to be critical of the man. He was an extraordinary teacher. it's funny, we had a falling out near the end, but like looking back, like 20 years later, like so much of what he taught me was so valuable. But there's a simplicity in living like that.
Yeah.
If you just assume that the whole world are bastards and you need to be the biggest bastard, the biggest, baddest bastard.
Exactly.
That's kind of, it's not easy, but it's simple, you know, because it's black and white. There are good guys and bad guys. Yeah. And if you, and
that is his comfort zone in a way.
It is, you know.
It's very uncomfortable in another way, but it is his comfort zone.
That's it. But the other thing there is as well is that it's all on you, right? Yeah. You are the main character in that story. If you go to somebody else and say, you hurt me, you're not the main character anymore, because somebody else, you have to acknowledge that somebody else hurt you. You know, you have to acknowledge that somebody else,
and run the risk that they might do so again in that moment.
Yeah.
So you're lying, or you're, you know. No, I think you're dead right. And also with that, what you were saying about certain masculine conditioning, I think this time what we probably need is to reevaluate all that stuff, but in a balanced way, because in the last couple of years it's been pushed away a lot, where it's like, oh, it's toxic, or it's this, or it's that. Actually, it's hugely valuable and valued by both men and women and everyone.
Yeah.
But it and pushing it away won't make it like that. Then you get the Andrew Tate people of the world.
Yes.
Where people go, oh, you need to be this hyper masculine. I'm like, no, all of it, please.
Yeah.
Because everything we push away is just going to fester.
Yeah.
And there was another thing you said there. But yeah, it does have a lot to do with I think I heard Tony Robbins say this, actually. I was listening to him this morning, and he said, like, it's just, it's where home is. And your home might be very uncomfortable, or might be a very dark place, but you're used to it, so it's home. It's like, he gives the example of people rebuilding their house after a hurricane, and you see it on the news, and you go, oh, those people. But then you see it a third and a second, or a third and a fourth time, and you go, why are you not moving?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
If someone hits you in the face, you're like, that's terrible. But if you keep showing up to their house to get hit in the face, you're like, But it's because it's home.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, and again, do you stay or do you leave? Do you learn to handle the discomfort, or do you move on? You know, and I think that is the big question, and something that goes back to what you were saying about saying to another person that, I'm just using the example of you hurt me or something like that, you know. Again, to go back to Chinese medicine, there's the idea of the 5 elements. The liver is wood, and there's an idea that there's a relationship between all of them, and one of the things that can really help in a situation where liver qi is stagnant is you strengthen lung qi. We say lung controls, metal controls wood, lung controls liver. And the way I've always read that is that it is literally about expression, you know. And the thing about expressing something is that all of a sudden it's not your problem anymore. It doesn't live inside you anymore. You've let it out into the world, and you no longer have control. As long as all of these things are still inside of you, you have control of them, even if they're awful.
Yeah.
As soon as you let it out into the world,
it's really funny, because I think that's right, and I've been going to a Chinese medicine practitioner for a long time.
You've been cheating on me
in Holland. No, he was my original. I'm cheating on him with you. I just actually, I was in Ireland. I was like, Jesus, is there one of these fuckers around here? I was like, yeah, there is. But he always said, I obviously don't know the vocabulary as you do, but he said that I was characterized by that wooden aspect, but it's funny, because what you said, because my lungs are actually quite weak, like I have a lot of asthma and that kind of thing, and then my surname is bloody liver, you know, so it's so funny. Like lever is Dutch for liver, so it's so funny how the world's just like, yeah, dude, this is your homework, are you gonna fucking do something with that? And then I love singing, you know, so it's all it all, you know, that's the that worked really well, like,
that's the funny thing. It's the yin and yang, and the thing people don't often get wrong by the yin and yang is they're not a binary. At maximum yin it turns to yang, at maximum yang it turns to yin. And one way this is when you have, let's say you have a wood metal imbalance, which is likely.
But
You know, you either. Oh, there we go. Out it
oh
comes.
yeah, well I had to, yeah.
But either you'll it'll keep catching you out, or you'll be drawn to things that naturally balance it. You know, and that's the lovely thing about Chinese medicine and most indigenous medicines, that they are very common sense. You know, they don't separate the mind and the body, and often when they're giving you this deep wisdom and stuff, you're just like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like use your if you have difficulty getting stuff from inside to outside, absolutely do something that uses your lungs. You know, but that is wonderful that you're a singer as well. Your story was completely made evident by the person sitting across from you. I had this conversation with I won't, but like you said it, like trauma is also trauma is such a loaded term, but like these situations there's a pot of gold there as well. And I will often tell patients that
made it Irish for you there, lads.
There's
a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
I know he hates that stuff, so that's why.
Sorry, I'm just listening to hear the sponsorship deals rolling in. Paddy Wagon.
This is going great. Sorry, Anthony Patrick O'Connor. We just had to do that.
Would you leave my trauma out of this?
I just want to wind you up a bit.
I like when we were talking about your trauma, but
I know you're very comfortable with that. Go on.
There was somebody I was chatting to, and or you'll often get to a stage where like people are like, look, my stomach hurts, but I can't leave my terrible job, so just fucking plaster over it. And I'll be like, I'll do what I can, buddy, but you know,
Yeah, you're basically saying, I'm not going to do the thing I need, so just keep bandaging me up. Yeah.
But the funny thing about Chinese medicine is that often by bringing people into an awareness of what's going on, a different way of conceptualizing it, and I've seen big changes in people's lives that aren't a result of me going, you have to fucking quit your job. Yeah. That are just a result of, listen to your body, look at this and this, look at how you feel, when does it crop up, and so on, and people make their own decisions. But you do find some people, and not everything has to exist on this huge level of deep, somaticized, embodied trauma. Like sometimes a headache is just a headache. Like, you know, that's it. Or sometimes you're stressed about exams, you need a bit of help with your tummy, you get through the exams and all's good. Again. But for really chronic stuff, really like patterns that keep repeating, sometimes I will have patients come into me, and they're often people that have come to see me and I've gotten them a bit better, and it's lasted them a few months, and then it's recurred, and and they're just at crisis point, and I'm like, okay, now this is interesting, because you are literally, your nose is against the brick wall here. That you have tried everything to avoid dealing. You have tried everything to avoid dealing with this thing. And I'm not saying that in a blame way. This is human nature. Very few of us like joyfully leap into, you know, dealing with our traumas. But, you know, your body, your mind, your life circumstances, your relationships are all screaming at you. And it's a tremendous opportunity to learn to listen. And take action, and take honest action. But I personally don't be like, you need to fix this, you need to do that, you need to do that. What I usually try to tell people, and this goes back to the metal, wood, the lung, liver thing, is I'm like, you need to express honestly. You need to be okay with the consequences. You need to be okay with knowing that you are not in control of the outcome of these things. I think if you can hold all those things, you have, you know, if we are focusing on you, this will put you in the best state for change. There's a load of caveats. There's a big asterisk there. If you're really dealing with difficult situations, you need a support network. I usually don't encourage people to go down this path unless they have some kind of support, some kind of cushion or something like that. But sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes...
That's what it is. That's what it is. Here, I'll make you comfortable by bringing this back to me. I was just thinking when we were talking about bringing things out there, that a thing that I always notice, this might be very silly, but I'd be interested to hear what you, sometimes the silly stuff can be good, you know. I notice when I'm having a deep conversation with someone and I feel a real connection, like I'm with you right now, but I'm not saying this is a deep conversation. It feels to my, you know, my little mind, it feels that way. I notice I get very flushed. I wonder... Does that have to do with something of that moving, or like?
It's liver. I would say it's probably liver qi releasing.
Yeah, because I really notice it, and then I have to watch out not to get hyper, because I can then feel a little bit hyper when I do that. You give me a very knowing, slightly annoying.
Oh no, I get it too.
Smile. Okay,
I get it too. And then like afterwards, after like a really big conversation, I'll be in the car going, "Was I an asshole? Did I talk too much?"
Yeah. It gets very
yeah.
But it's actually good. Yeah.
And I think it's the feeling of people whose liver qi is often repressed that you know, when it releases maybe a little bit too strongly.
Because it is pushed down, it kind of goes, oh, thank God, there we go. Yeah.
And the way I describe to students liver qi is like flying a kite.
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, the wood element is associated with wind as well. But it's this idea of like, most qi in the body descends, liver qi and spleen qi ascend. And liver qi is like, you want to go out on a windy day, to fly a kite, you want a certain amount of wind there. You have to kind of ride those currents, right? You know, you don't like too little wind and you're just flopping on the ground. You're getting nothing done.
Yeah.
Too much wind and you're tugged around. But also it needs to be grounded. So when liver qi ascends like this, in a creative fashion or revolutionary fashion, revolutions like social revolutions are phenomena of liver qi. You know. It needs to be grounded in something. And that's the kite string. And that's your hand on the kite. And that's your ability to ground yourself. And actually, the dominant characteristic of this is actually softness. So we say that people that have a lot of liver qi stagnation, they tend to tighten up.
Yeah.
They have tense neck and shoulders. They have tense jaws and so on. And actually what grounds the liver is this softness. And we actually have herbs that, like Bai Xiao, that we literally say they soften the liver.
Yeah.
And what it does is it helps that grounding. So it's not suppressing.
Yeah.
If liver qi is ascending, you don't push the kite down. You just make sure that the string is tight.
And a way to do that would maybe, like, I'm just thinking about it in this instance because I've felt it so often, and then I've gone, I kind of talk myself down or talk down to myself a bit about it, going like, oh, geez, you're a bit hyper or something. Yeah. But now I'm actually thinking in a more wanting to embrace it. Like, what would be a good grounding way then? Just to feel your body a bit more, or to do, or something like that, where you feel like you're, oh, where's my foot, and where's, or look, is that too simple?
Honestly, what I would say is just, look, make sure you're drinking enough water, like you do any kind of grounding exercise. But the other thing is that, the language of Chinese medicine, people often talk about balance and harmony. And I strongly believe that it's not about balance. It's absolutely not about balance. If you're not drinking any water, right, your body's out of balance. Not really. Your body just finds a new balance. And it's not a balance we like. You know, your kidneys won't function well. You know, your salt levels will be way too high in your blood. Yeah. But that's still in balance, you know? And then, like, even when you die, you're still in balance with your surroundings. You're now becoming food for everything else. So the language of Chinese medicine often moves towards the mean. You know, don't want anything too high, anything too low. We talk about balance and harmony the whole time. Actually, it's absolutely fine to be completely hyper sometimes. Like when you look at the weather outside, every once in a while we get a massive summer storm. Yeah. There's nothing balanced about that. Yeah. But it's part of like an overall tapestry. So that I wouldn't necessarily see as a problem. The self-talk afterwards, I think that's it. And maybe if you were finding that you're expressing yourself in this big burst every 3 weeks, you're like, maybe try to express yourself honestly a little bit every day over time so that it doesn't build up that much.
I'm even realizing now that even just noticing it is helpful. Yeah, when you're putting some new awareness to it. Yeah, because I've noticed in the past that I would be in that kind of hyper, feeling very connected state, and then if you stay in that too long that way, you can kind of get into fights or something because you're so like, oh Jesus, the connection or the thing, or you're. It's also that thing of holding on to something, which always makes it terrible. Instead of experiencing it and going, okay, now it's high, tomorrow it might be low, and it's like when you feel happy.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest killer of that is going, oh God, I hope this will never go away. Jeez, it's gone.
Yeah.
Is that, I think Luca Bloom has that song, The Beauty of Everyday Things. I want to hold on to the feeling, but it's no good to cling. I learned the hunter's patience, the beauty of everyday things.
Oh.
I thought that was a nice one. The hunter's patience is a nice one.
Yeah, and I like one of my favorite books. There's a quote in it: the hunting is the beginning of the eating.
Oh yeah,
which I love. And then you're like, where does the hunting begin?
Yeah,
you know, the hunting presumably begins with like, well, first of all, you have to have the ability to walk and run and fire a bow and arrow. You need to know the land. You need to like, where does the eating begin?
Yeah.
And then, you know, like people just focus on the meal, and you're like, the work came far earlier.
Yeah. No, it's true. That's a good point, actually. That's a good way of looking at that as well. There was one you were saying about sometimes bringing something in. I don't think we have to do that every time. Mm-hmm. But I was listening to a bit of music while I was working, and there was this line that hit me. Let me think of it now. It's a song called Born Human by Martin Simpson, who's I think in the north of England or something. He's a wonderful dadgat guitar player and a singer.
Lovely.
And the song Born Human, it's really funny, kind of. Or it's funny, but it has some depth to it, I feel. Like it is more about, he's kind of like, why was I born human? I might as well have been a cat, or, you know, that kind of. So it's kind of funny, but there's some lovely lines in it. And one of them is... when you see the earth bleeding and you know you're home at last. That for some reason. And then the next one is, when you feel your body broken, then you'll find the strength to act. I think maybe that ties in a little bit to what we were saying, but it's also nice that I don't really know, that second line I can kind of fill in, but the first one I don't really know what it means, but maybe it has something to do with about growing up and seeing the world for what it actually is, and then still embracing it or something. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. When you see the earth bleeding and you know you're home at last.
Well, I suppose if you can empathize with the pain of a place, then you have a connection with
that
it.
Might be it.
Yeah, but it's a great line, and you know, there's that's another way to ground ourselves, is to like literally be connected to the place where you are, to feel the changes in it. A couple of months ago, I was photographing the moon a lot, and after about a week or two of it, like I just intuitively knew when sunset was and where the moon would be and what phase it would be at, and cool. Like I understood, too much cloud cover, or it'll be rising behind that copse of trees there, it's going to look really good. And it was just an incredibly grounding experience.
Which is so funny that you're looking at something so far away.
Yeah.
But possibly because you're feeling its influence as well in your daily life. You're not journeying into space.
Yeah, it's just you're connected to your environment. Like we all have this. Like a friend of mine like designs cities, you know, and I was walking around Cork with him, and he was pointing out everything that was wrong. He's like, okay, that junction is wrong. That pedestrian crossing should be up there because it's backing up traffic here, and da-da-da. And I was like, does this not drive you fucking loopy?
Yeah.
Like, that your knowledge has meant that you can't... Like, I don't see any of this stuff. Yeah. I walk around in blissful ignorance going, Cork's good crack. Yeah. You know? And, like, we all have our own interpretations of the environment we see around us. And for some people, they see a forest, and they just see dollar signs, you know? But I think there's something to connecting with cycles. Like, I can have no influence over the moon. Yeah. And it's just kind of nice to, I don't know. I just, small. To be small. Yeah. To kind of show it its respect, you know?
It's one of the things I love about living here. When I lived in the Netherlands, I had no idea of the moon. Or even of temperature or stuff like that. Like I really noticed it here. We arrived in Clare in September 2019, and then it was Samhain at the end of October. At the end of October, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is a thing. Yeah. Like in Holland, that was just the thing where people went, oh, Halloween, that might be a bit of crack, and they have pumpkins and they wear silly costumes. But here you're like, oh no, this is actually a circumstance. This is circumstance I am in.
Yeah.
Because I'm so and seeing moonrises above the Burren and stuff like that. Never saw that when you're in a highly urbanized area. But it's brilliant.
It is.
It's a brilliant backdrop, and I love every season. So many people, especially in the Netherlands, but I think in a lot of places, are like, "Oh, I hate the winter. I don't like this. I don't."
Yeah.
I love all of it. I love. I mean, sure, there's discomfort as well, like we were talking about. To come back to that, in the winter, you definitely. You and I were having a chat with a mate last night about where to get good firewood.
We talked about firewood for a good 10 minutes.
Yeah, and how to heat up the house and all that crack. But it's great in the winter to go inside and realize, okay, this is where we tidy up the place a little bit on inside and we get rid of some stuff. And I'm now looking forward to springtime, where I'm like, I've done a lot of work on myself this winter. Yeah. Time to have a bit of crack.
And I actually think that's adaptation. Again, that's, okay, it's winter. We call in the firewood. We go through the discomfort of that because it's a pain in the arse stacking firewood. But it's great. Do it joyfully. And I think one of the things that's annoying me about my work at the moment is that I really want to be a bit still. I really want to be like in tune with the weather. And, as I've often said to you, but like in Chinese medicine, winter is not the season of death. Autumn is the season of death because that's when you harvest crops. You literally, end life. Winter is the season of germination. So there's loads of life, but it's not visible. It's happening under the ground. It's growing. Yeah. So by the time spring is here, it explodes, And that's really what I feel like doing at the moment, is like doing quiet, inner, not easily externally benchmarked work. Yeah. And actually what I'm being forced to do at the moment is like hit a load of deadlines, deliver a load of projects, really visible, measurable stuff. And, find that very frustrating. Very, 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 very frustrating.
It is.
But to come back to stress, I think there's one more thing that I think is very important. And like,
go on.
Well, I say two more things about it, but like, you can talk forever about trauma, and a lot of what we've talked about, not predominantly, but a lot of it has been like inward focused. It's the yin. The yang is you can deal with it by doing, and like sometimes mental health is like balancing a checkbook, and just make sure that there's something coming in as well as when there's going out. Because really being an adult means giving, it means you make promises, your community, your family, your employer, people rely on you. By necessity of being an adult, you will have stuff going out. What are you putting in, And I think that's something, my girlfriend Katie, she was doing, she's an astrologer, and she was doing she found this book about an aspect of it anyway. And I was like, she, looked up my birthday and stuff. And I was like, what does it say about me? And she said, it says people with displacement desperately need to take care of themselves, but won't fucking do anything about it. And I was like, fair enough. So since then, what I've done is like, I book some kind of treatment in for myself once every 2 weeks, and for me, counseling is not my go-to. I find counseling helpful if I have a very busy life situation, like if I have a million things going on, I need to make decisions and stuff like that. And I found it really helpful to go and talk through that external stuff with somebody who can hold space. But when it's more like inner fucking turmoil or stuff from the past and stuff, I prefer different practices, So I have something like that booked in every 2 weeks. And I have something like that booked in this afternoon, actually. So it's interesting sometimes the way the stress can peak.
Yeah.
And I'll often find out with my own patients. I'll be like, how have you been over the last 3 weeks? And they were like, fine until last night, until I realized this. And then this went and this went and this went.
It's either it's some cosmic harmony, synchronicity, whatever, or it's just that you're getting ready for the big release. Maybe that's just what it is.
Something.
But it's, it's powerful to do that. I saw something, I don't know anything about astrology, but I heard someone talking about the different signs that people have. I'm a Capricorn. and it said something like Capricorns just need to. It was similar to yours. Capricorns just need to enjoy this, and I kind of thought, oh, that's an interesting. Like it said something about certain people are healers and certain people are like this and that and the other. And it said Capricorns just need to, and I'm sure that's only a small part of it, but I like this idea of we all come into the world carrying something and bringing something, and those are different, like baggage. Yes. In my head anyway, and but I like that idea of what would you call it? Because it nearly sounds to people like you and I nearly selfish, but actually, I think it's just one of the ways we try to transform pain into love. Yeah, probably, and that's I think what most things in life. If you look at it in a spiritual way, I think it is about transforming pain or transmuting pain into love. And for some people, it's on the inside, and they just have to get comfortable with themselves.
Every action under certain circumstances and for certain people can actually be a pathway to spiritual growth.
Yeah.
Everything. And that's not, I don't mean that in a flippant way.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Like, life is very difficult. And I think that's something as well that, Krishnamurti, the teacher, he used to, we wouldn't have called himself a teacher, but it's something he used to say. He was like, concepts are useless, He's like, he would have arguments with religious leaders and scientists and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, well, all you need to do is this and this and this, and that will free you from pain. And he'd be like, if you have a toothache, does it help with that? If your kid just died, does it help with that? And he's like, you've got to test these concepts against real life and be intensely pragmatic about them. And I don't think there's one thing that suits everybody, but I think what you were talking about there, it sounds like, and again, I have very rudimentary secondhand knowledge, but like the South Node and the North Node in astrology, where basically you come in carrying a bit of baggage, which is your South Node. And like ideally over the course of your life, if you can hit your North Node, it's like you've leveled up. This is like, this is like a main quest objective.
Yeah. And then we go again and again and again.
That's it. But I think there is a sense of like, I've been thinking a lot about Catholicism lately, and it's weird because being an Irish person of my age, like we turned massively against the Catholic Church, and for very, very good reason. And it's such a big part of our culture that it's taken a long time for me to see anything positive in it. But like I often think of older people I know in very difficult, like extraordinarily difficult circumstances with their own illness or the illness of a loved one or something like this. And they're just like, we're going to offer it up to the Virgin Mary, And I see that as an intensely pragmatic, measurable way for them to deal with what was going on. I think the problem arises when you're like, okay, now everybody has to do this. It's the only way to deal with it. But yeah,
I found that those kind of things, how can you say this properly? I think sometimes, especially if you're a bit like, if you go to university and you like talking about ideas and philosophy, and a lot of people will say things like, oh, he's a very religious person, but he's actually really nice, as if it's something to overcome. And I'm realizing more and more that it's usually not a coincidence. And I'm not a religious person.
Yeah, normal.
And I definitely see all those problems, but I don't really like it when people throw out the baby with the bathwater. And it's a bit like to make it less about religion, like. Sorry, I'm going a bit tangenty, but anyway, we'll just deal with it.
How dare you, a tangent in this space at this time?
I know, it's not eloquent either.
This far north at this time of year.
But even like with the more pagan stuff that people still strongly relate to here in the west of Ireland, I always had this sense of like, oh, it's lovely. It's a nice thing. It's a bit of nice bit of window dressing or whatever. But actually, I see more and more how practical it is, and it's that thing of like when you were talking, I was thinking of knock and the door will open. It's something like, oh yeah, it's a nice metaphor. yes, but very thinly.
Yeah.
Like it is actually, that's a very truthful thing.
Yeah.
That if you ask for something, I asked for, when we moved here, we had a lot of people around us, but there was a particular type of friend I was missing, and I just went, can I have that type of friend?
Oh,
Here
no
he is.
way.
Yes.
Oh, that's
you
gorgeous.
You are only my manifestation. No, but I don't believe
Oh, so
that.
that's why I popped into existence
Yes,
20 odd
exactly,
months ago.
exactly.
I was wondering where I was
No,
before that.
but without joking aside,
Yeah.
because you know I don't mean that, and I don't mean
Yeah.
that someone. I was watching Dave Chappelle his show on
Where's the
Netflix,
bell?
The Dreamer.
Where's the bell?
The Dreamer, yeah, and he was talking about people being in each other's dreams. It's like, at this moment I am in that person's dream.
Yeah.
That's not how I look at you at all.
Yeah.
But I do think sometimes you can call something, and certain things will align or people will connect.
Absolutely,
And it can work for, but it actually, it's so funny that when you ask for a thing, or with playing music, I've asked for, I would like to be in a position where I'm playing music. And then when you look at the road that got me there, you're like, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But something was guiding that. And so sometimes stuff like that can be very, sorry that I
sure.
went on, but
No, I
it
love
can
that,
be very
yeah.
practical.
And just to go back to what you were
Yeah.
saying about like pagan rites and religious practices, my favorite podcast probably, The Emerald, Josh Schry had this great quote. He was talking about animism, like
Yeah.
cultures that believe that objects have identity or spirit or whatever you call it. And he was like, made this beautiful distinction that, and it's one of those times where like something that's been knocking around the back of my head for like literally years, somebody just
goes, yeah.
said it, you know?
Yeah.
And he was like, when a lot of people look at these indigenous cultures that have animist traditions, the way a lot of Westerners think about it is, it's lovely that you think that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not true,
Yeah.
but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful that you look at the world like that. It's such a wonderful mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake.
Yeah.
You might not understand it.
Yeah.
You might not be able to conceptualize it, but they're not morons. They're not misguided. This is their truth. And it's as true as yours,
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that drives me up the wall. We'll keep it positive, but that drives me up the wall when people, especially about religion, you go, oh, well, yes, you're afraid of death.
Yeah.
So you made this shit up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but what do you believe in?
Yeah.
I really notice it when I have a healthy distrust of authority. Won't go too deep into that.
I don't have to like pretend that I love authority now to
Yes,
make
you do.
for good
Yeah, you have to
content.
play that role. Come on, Anthony. But it's like I've noticed that those people who don't believe in anything spiritual, they usually really need the government, or they need stuff like that. Like they also need to put something above them, but they just pick like civil servants, and they would obviously not agree with me in there. But I've seen people accept things that are clearly not true. And I'm like, how do you think you don't have a belief system?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's,
Like we all have belief systems.
Yeah.
And you're making fun of people that have the ones that you cannot see. But I find that those can be much sturdier sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they are not always so dependent on circumstance. Whereas you have to make the circumstance, for instance, of the government being good.
Yeah.
That circumstance has to be true for you. So you're becoming blind to a lot of things because you're like, no, but I have to. This is my God in a way, and that's a bit shit to say it that way. But
I'm coming around to thinking that it's not a perfect word, but talking about people's like obsession with politics or capitalism or something, you might as well call it a religion.
Yeah.
If it's the dominant belief system in your life that guides most of your actions, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, like what else would you call it? It's not perfect, but it's so funny when people are like, I don't believe in wishy-washy stuff like, the seasons or, engaging in ritual in accordance with celestial, the environment that birthed us. I believe in hard facts like economics.
The thing that literally changes when someone talks about it.
And that's not shitting on economics, but it's not a hard science. It's a soft science. And that's absolutely fine. Most things are soft sciences. If we're talking about science versus religion, which kind of is roughly, but a lot of people know, for example, with what I do, acupuncture or something like that, they're like, I only believe in science. And I was like, okay, so like if you take a paracetamol, do you like read a few papers and stuff?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I don't believe in the papers. I believe in the scientists. And I was like, okay, so you listen to scientists. And they're like, well, no. I read the back of the box. And
It's just an accepted as gospel kind of very dogmatic.
Yeah.
We've seen that in the recent years a lot, of course. Yeah, we're not going in there.
There's a really big bell.
Yeah, no, we're not going in it. But I just want to say, like, it's people actually presenting their faith as a thing that's fixed.
Yes.
And that's even the whole idea of science, which I think you and I both respect in its proper way.
Massively.
Is actually the questioning things. They're like, no, do not question the science. And you're like, what?
Scientists question the science.
Yeah,
that's why they have a job.
It's literally like, it just sounds like the Bible or something. Just like, don't question the Bible. But anyway, we won't go into too much. But what we were talking about is that those things, they're actually practical. Practically helpful, and it's and you can change your state of mind by even offering up your stress. I've done that. I've done that, like offering up my stress to whatever it is. The universe, Mother Mary, whatever it is, and it actually changes your state of mind.
It does, because there's an aspect of our health that lives outside of ourselves, and you could go one step further, and I believe that there is an aspect of ourself that lives outside ourselves. So the mind is divided into 5 in Chinese medicine, and the aspect associated with the liver and wood is the hun, and it is balanced out. The hun is yang, the po is yin. The po is associated with the lungs and metal, and it is the aspect of self that lives within the physical confines of your body. It is your muscles and bones and sinew. I always view it as proprioception. Like, athletes will have very strong po. They really are very aware of their body, and it ends at your skin. That's where the po ends. The hun is dreams, creativity, astral projection, weird vibes, connecting with a fucking tree or something like that. And, these should be in harmony. But these people you described that like put their faith very strongly into politics or science or something like that tend to have a very strong paw, like a dominant paw. And then people that maybe are on the other end of the spectrum and whose feet are barely touching the ground, who are a little bit away with the fairies and stuff like that, as we would say, would have a hun that is very, very strong as well. So, we're all on that spectrum, too. But I can't remember where I was going with that.
It was just a lovely bit of this podcast was to be named Stress, but it's like Anthony using stress to talk about Chinese medicine a lot.
Oh, yeah, but by offering it up, that's what I'm saying, is you're kind of releasing the hun a little bit as well, because you're saying that it's not all about me. Yeah. And this is my problem sometimes with the way certain mindfulness practices are sold. It's like, it's your problem. The stress is your problem. Yeah. Deal with it. Go inside, do your meditation, do your breathing, do your exercise, sort out your diet, drink your water, get indoors. Whereas if you offer that up, you're making yourself a little bit small. Yeah. You were saying, I'm a small actor in a bigger system, and this bigger system is putting pressure on me. Yeah. So now I'm going to ask it for something. Let's work together here on this.
And isn't that like in a lot of sacred texts and stuff that identification is the root of a lot of problems? And I think, sorry. And I think I saw somewhere, I don't know what the Irish phrase actually is, but that if you're depressed, you would say in Irish something like, the sadness is on me.
The sadness is upon me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's very good, because actually I think if you say, which sounds a bit unnatural, but I heard someone talk about this, that even if you say this is being experienced, like instead of saying I have a headache, you go a headache is being experienced, which is a very unnatural thing to say. Yeah. But it does make a difference, because you don't identify so strongly with it. Yeah. Or even like I've done like on a meditation app where I had like a lot of pain in my shoulder, and they just go and you analyze the pain, and you really kind of dissect with your mind the pain, and it becomes less because you're really looking at it instead of being it. Yes. I think that's a thing with stress as well. Yeah. And when we say I am stressed, you're literally the force of stress. Yeah.
Yeah. When you say there is sadness upon me, there is stress upon me, it sounds transient. Yeah. It sounds like you're going through something. Not that you are something. you know?
Exactly.
And I really hope we're not minimizing this stuff, because like I'll say I don't have the fucking answers. Like the reason I think about this so much is because I struggle with this, you know?
Yeah, and we came into this episode with you being very stressed.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite clear that when it's great. I think it's great to think about the things you can gain when you're in pain, because they can offer a bit of hope as well.
I like that line.
But it doesn't mean that if you're getting smashed in the face or you lose a loved one, it's still really gonna hurt. And that's why we so often don't deal with it properly, and that goes for you and I as well.
Yeah.
Is because it is that painful.
Yeah.
Just a little aside, because I think we're probably nearly there. But I think I really don't like negative art, even though it definitely has a space. Sure. But I think, or there's definitely a place for it, and nihilistic stuff especially, because I feel what is very visible to us is suffering. And art can relieve that suffering by going, but actually, invisibly, there is hope.
Yeah.
And that always moves me very deeply. And that's why I don't like it when people go, I'm going to show you more of the pain. I'm like, no, I am aware of the pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe also why we talk about the positive side, but that's not to minimize anyone's suffering, because it's real, man. It really feels.
And just on that note, like I remember I was going through an awful time about 5 or 6 years ago, and the only thing that would help me, the Gloaming's version of the Sailor's Bonnet.
Oh, I love that.
And it's really funny because we know a local musician who hates that version.
Oh, you're going to have to talk to me about that.
Yeah. He was always giving out about it because it's too slow. But I remember, and a friend, or a lad I know, Cahill, from the Altered Hours, a fantastic band from Cork. I remember he did an interview for Hot Press or something, and he was like talking about when he was a teenager, and he was like, those bands helped. And it wasn't because I liked their clothes or I thought they were cool. He was like, I didn't understand the world. I was in pain, and that tangibly helped me.
Yes.
The time when I was struggling, there was just a storm in my head, and the only thing that would soothe it was the Sailor's Bonnet. I used to just listen to it on repeat, every hour for like 10 minutes. I'd listen to it. It was the only thing that kind of very measurably kept me going. And like I tried like alcohol and stuff like that, did not work, but that did. So, but the flip side of that is I often think about like the ancient Greek tragedies, these plays where people would come together as a group and watch the most awful stuff played out on stage. Like just the most horrible concepts, family killing family, incest, infanticide, pastricide, tragedy of just heartbreaking stuff. And these people would come together as a community and weep and feel this stuff and go through catharsis. And, again, I think I fell into the trap of being like, that's a beautiful mistake. I was like, oh yeah, that's their X Factor, that's their Marvel movies. That's all they had at the time, But thinking back, like those people lived a very hard life. Yeah. They were members of warring states. There was disease, there was famine, there was, terrible inequality, there was conscription, there was piracy. And to exist in that world, them having a space where they could go through those emotions, and I think very importantly as a community, and then experience them and then leave and go back and do the work they had to do to live their life. I think that was very important as well. And I think maybe with the art, I don't know, I'm just spitballing, I'm not going to make any big things here, but like I think experiencing it as a community rather than like sitting in your room alone and digesting a load of quite negative stuff maybe is, but I'm not going to speak for anyone, whatever works for you.
And also I want to say, like, I do really appreciate that kind of dark side of art as well, and I definitely don't want art only to be very joyful or flippant or whatever, but I like it when it has still underneath the suffering a message of hope. And sometimes it's just like, I love acting as well, and it's a very interesting art form because you put on someone else's energy and it's very palpable, and you act very differently. But I think the community aspect of it is as always very important, and probably with stress, dealing with stress as well. And maybe tying back to what you said about mindfulness being then made into a commodity as well, and kind of like, here's your mindfulness, here's your little ration of mindfulness. Deal with it.
Yeah. The last thing, because I think we should wind up now.
Yeah, we should.
Do you have a piece of art where if you're upset and you're like, I just need to feel something, I need something to, make me a bit teary or something like that, do you have a piece of art you go to?
Yes, I wish it was more cool.
Mamma Mia too.
I had something. Huh?
Mamma Mia too.
Yeah, exactly. No, I listened to a lot when I was very sad when I was a teenager, and someone very dear to me had passed. I became a big U2 fan, and they had a DVD of them playing at Slane Castle.
Oh yeah.
And actually, since moved to Ireland, I met a lot of people who were at that gig.
Yeah.
And it was the same day that Ireland beat fucking Holland out of the European Cup qualifier. So I was very annoyed with that.
Painful on multiple levels.
Yes, because he brings it up like on stage, and it's the only time he's ever wore an Irish flag is when he pretends to be the guy who fucking scored the goal. But anyway, but there's a whole thing because Bono's dad just passed before that show, and that show has such like. It really is like a journey. I know that's a word that's overused, but it's gorgeous. It starts off just with some bright tunes and all that, and then he sings "Kite" for his dad. And I played that a lot when my friend passed on the guitar and sang it. All about like a kite blowing in the wind, and but knowing that it's not goodbye either, and that always brought me to tears because you can sense his emotion. But then there's a beautiful release after that as well, and then after, I think the high point of that DVD or of that concert is like they have that, and it's sad, and it picks back up, and then they play "All I Want Is You," and he dedicates that to his wife, and it's really a beautiful love song. And then they just have the best transition ever into "Where the Streets Have No Name," where he keeps singing "All I Want Is You," and the whole crowd is singing it, and you hear the chords, and you kind of hear the buzzing, and I must have listened to that 5,000 times, but that's always one for me, which gets the whole journey because it gets me a bit teary, and then there's the release as well. So what about you?
Well, I think what you said about Journey, because the one I had in mind, I can't actually talk about because I think I'll spoil it for a lot of people.
Grand.
But it's Dark on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's a German series.
Yeah,
it's
I
3
didn't
seasons.
touch it because it looked too dark for me.
It lives up to its name, but it's dark with a purpose. And terrible things happen. The characters go through a lot, and but like it was always meant to be 3 seasons. It's one of those really tight shows that they had a destination in mind. The last episode, I just watched the second half of the last episode, and it is because of the journey. It's not because it's just like, you get stuff with great soundtracks and stuff like that can pull on the heartstrings, but this is really like they spent 3 seasons trying to say something, and it finished there as well.
They really nailed it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Musically, the Frames set list, what happens when the heart just stops. Gen Hanser tells a story about a dog when he was a teenager. It was a stray dog. They called him Deefer, which is Deefer dog, on his street. And it destroys me. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, and it's like, and there's so many little bits, like it's an acoustic song, but like he's making the noise of a dog whining.
Oh no.
And there's like this little synth line that's just going, and that's how the song starts. And it sounds like an animal whining, and that always gets me. I can imagine. You need those little bits, man. Sometimes you're just okay. So we'll wrap this up. We'll go hop on YouTube, have a cry.
Yeah, yes, to get and hold each other during. And actually, I want to do one more reference, and then we'll stop because we could do this all day long. But
this could be its own episode.
Yeah, it could. But I I love Van Morrison's Sweet Thing. I love that song because that's a very hopeful one. And then the Waterboys have a version where the intro is so joyous with the fiddle flying.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they turned around. I think they turned around one of the lines because I think it's I will never grow so old again, and I will walk and talk in gardens wet with rain. And they turn it around, so it ends with "I will never grow so old again, ever grow so old again." And I love that because it's that. For me, I think I've gotten much happier as I've gotten older, and life has become much more meaningful. The more like I've been able to shape it myself, and that just resonates so strongly with "I will never be that old man that I was," and that makes me very happy even saying it.
Yeah, love that. This has been Western Philosophy and our exploration and embodiment of stress. Thank you very much for listening. Follow us on all the socials and bits like that at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. We'll be back next week with another episode. Shalom.